The flea market had a strange pulse that day, a low hum of murmured haggling, the clinking of old trinkets, the shuffle of weary feet against cracked pavement. Mia lamely wandered between the narrow stalls, her fingers brushing against chipped porcelain dolls, yellowed lace curtains, and tarnished jewelry. Her sketchbook weighed heavily in her backpack, its blank pages whispering accusations at her lack of inspiration. Then she saw it. Tucked in the shadow of a rusted carousel horse and a stack of broken mirrors was a painting, almost forgotten. A portrait, grimy with dust and time, leaned against a sagging crate. It was a young girl, no more than 7, dressed in a faded blue frock, with enormous, sorrowful eyes that seemed too lifelike, too present. Mia couldn't explain the way her stomach dropped or how her skin prickled as she stared into those eyes. She hesitated. Maybe it was the desperate need for something, anything, to reignite her stagnant art. Maybe it was a morbid curiosity. Maybe it was something else entirely. Whatever it was, Mia reached out, her fingertips brushing the cracked frame. The painting flinched. It was so subtle she almost missed it, the faintest ripple under the canvas, like the surface of a pond disturbed by a single falling leaf. Mia gasped and snatched her hand back, glancing around wildly. No one else had noticed. The crowd flowed around her, oblivious. A vendor shouted prices in the distance. A child whined for ice cream. Heart pounding, Mia forced a laugh under her breath. "You're imagining things." She told herself that again when her hand, almost without her permission, reached forward once more and seized the painting. It felt warm. The vendor barely looked up from his battered newspaper as she asked the price. $20, he grunted, shrugging. "Take it. That thing's been here forever." His voice had a strange, hollow echo, like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. Mia barely registered handing over the money. The moment the painting was in her possession, a heaviness wrapped around her shoulders, as if the air itself had thickened. Cradling the frame against her chest, she weaved through the market and stepped into the afternoon sunlight. But the sky, she was sure of it, seemed just a little dimmer than it had before. Still, she clutched the painting tighter and whispered, almost offensively, "Maybe it's exactly what I needed." As Mia turned the corner to head home, the faintest sound stirred from within the frame, a breath, soft and rattling, like something waking up. The first night, Mia blamed the building. Her apartment, a cramped third-floor walk-up in an aging complex, was notorious for its creaks and groans. Pipes shuddered in the walls. Floorboards whimpered under invisible feet. It was easy, logical, to dismiss the faint, muffled sobbing that drifted through her darkened bedroom around 2 a.m. As the house settling, or maybe a neighbor crying through thin walls. But by the third night, the sound had sharpened. It wasn't general crying anymore. It was a child weeping raw, wet, gasping sobs that prickled the hair along Mia's arms and sent a cold sweat down her spine. The noise wasn't coming through the walls. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from inside her apartment. No matter how tightly she wrapped herself in her covers, how she buried her head under the pillows, the sobbing persisted, low, keening, sorrowful. Mia lay paralyzed in bed, heart hammering against her ribs like a frantic captive. At dawn, when the pale light finally seeped through her curtains, the sounds stopped, as if they had never been there at all. That morning, bleary-eyed and running on coffee and denial, Mia set up her phone to record overnight. Maybe it's just me, she thought. Maybe it's sleep paralysis or some freaky audio illusion. If there was proof, she could deal with it logically. Right? The next night, she pressed record on her phone and set it beside her bed. She tried to sleep, but the crying began earlier this time, worming into her brain, louder, more desperate. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself not to listen. When morning finally came, Mia's hands trembled as she grabbed her phone. Her stomach churned as she hit play. At first, just white noise, her own restless breathing, the occasional creak of the bed. She fast-forwarded. Then it came, soft, broken sobs, threading through the static like poisoned lace. Mia's chest tightened. She leaned closer. The sobbing built into an eerie wail, not just sorrow, but rage. And then, suddenly, a child's voice sliced through the recording, shrill and raw. Mia! Mia recoiled so violently that she dropped the phone onto the floor, heart crashing against her ribs. The recording continued to play from the cracked screen, the voice now reduced to desperate, choking sobs. She stared at the painting across the room. Even in the thin daylight, it seemed darker somehow, the girl's tearful eyes heavier with something she couldn't name. The realization slid icy fingers down her spine. It wasn't just crying anymore. It knew her name. The next few days passed in a fog of sleepless nights and mounting fear. Mia tried to stay out of her apartment as much as possible, lingering in coffee shops and libraries until closing time. But no matter where she went, the painting and the sobbing haunted her thoughts. She needed answers. Armed with a determination born from exhaustion and fear, Mia turned to the only source she trusted, the flea market vendor who had sold her the painting. It took hours of questioning grizzled sellers and sifting through the maze of booths before she found him, a stooped man with nicotine-stained fingers and a wary glint in his eye. At first, he claimed ignorance. Old junk. Came in a box. Don't know a thing about it, he muttered. But when Mia pressed harder, mentioning the crying and the name Evangeline she had heard whispered in her dreams, the man paled, as if she had uttered a forbidden spell. He leaned closer, voice dropping to a harsh whisper. You shouldn't have brought that thing home. Piece by piece, Mia stitched together fragments of local lore. Evangeline Darrow, the name matched a long cold case from the 1940s. Heiress to an old banking fortune, Evangeline had disappeared without a trace days before her 18th birthday. Her family, shrouded in scandal and suspicion, had offered lavish rewards for information, but no body had ever been found. Whispers hinted at betrayal from someone close, a family member, a lover, but no culprit had ever surfaced. One article described her as unsettlingly beautiful, bright yet secretive, with an air of sadness that clung to her like perfume. It wasn't just the tragedy that made her a local legend, it was the rumors that after her disappearance, anyone who tried to profit from her story met grisly, inexplicable deaths. That objects tied to Evangeline were cursed, that her spirit lingered, too furious or too cunning to pass on. Still, the question gnawed at Mia. Why did it feel like Evangeline didn't want to be found? That night, unable to sleep, Mia rifled through the antique frame for hidden compartments. She found it, tucked into the frame's rotting wood, sealed behind a false panel, a fragment of an old diary, delicate as dried petals. The writing was frantic, as if scrawled in the dark. They all think I am the prize, but I will never belong to any of them. Let them search. Let them rot. I have made sure no one will ever find me again. I have chosen my cage. Mia's hands shook as she reread the words. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a warning. The hairs on Mia's neck prickled. This wasn't just a haunted painting. It was a prison, and Evangeline had willingly locked herself inside. And now, piece by piece, she was clawing her way out, through Mia. Mia thought she knew fear. The late-night sobbing. The diary's cryptic confession. The chilling certainty that she was no longer alone in her own home. But nothing prepared her for the moment her reflection betrayed her. It started small, almost laughable, if it hadn't been so unsettling. One morning, bleary-eyed, Mia caught her reflection lagging in the bathroom mirror. She brushed it off as a trick of the light. Overwork. Lack of sleep. But then it happened again. A second's delay when she lifted her hand to her face. A half-smile when she wasn't smiling. A tilt of the head that felt wrong. Curious. Observant. The mirror wasn't just reflecting her. It was studying her. Each day, it grew bolder. At first, the lag stretched longer. Half a heartbeat. Then a full one. Then, late one night, Mia stumbled out of bed for a glass of water and froze. In the faint blue light of the kitchen, she saw it. Her reflection, or what should have been her reflection, was standing in the hallway mirror. staring directly at her, even though Mia hadn't yet turned that way. The figure's head tilted slowly, almost lovingly, as if savoring a secret Mia wasn't privy to. Mia backed away, breath catching in her throat. The figure mimicked her retreat perfectly, until it didn't. Instead of stepping back with her, the reflection leaned forward, palms pressed against the glass, as if desperate to cross over. Mia stumbled into the living room, heart hammering, and threw a blanket over the nearest mirror. Then another, and another. She couldn't look at herself anymore. She didn't trust what she might see. But that night, hiding under layers of blankets on the couch, she made a horrifying discovery. Even with every mirror covered, she could feel it, the sense of being watched. And when she dared to lift the corner of a blanket from the bathroom mirror at sunrise, her blood ran cold. The mirror was empty. No reflection at all. For one heart-stopping moment, the glass remained blank, a smooth, darkened portal, until Mia's own reflection walked slowly back into view from the edges, wiping a tear from its cheek, and smiling. The message was clear. Mia wasn't looking at herself anymore. Something else had taken her place. And somewhere, unseen, it was growing stronger, waiting for the perfect moment to step free. Mia swore she would stay awake. She swore she wouldn't lose herself again. But exhaustion was a slow poison, and the thing in the mirrors knew it. The gallery event was meant to be a new beginning, a small exhibition where Mia could finally showcase her work, regain her footing after weeks of isolation. Her friends greeted her warmly, though their smiles seemed a little too tight, their eyes flickering uncertainly over her. She chalked it up to nerves. Maybe the weight of the painting's presence was still clinging to her. Maybe she was imagining it. As the evening wore on, the low hum of conversation, the tinkling of glasses, and the buzz of fluorescent lights blurred into a dull, throbbing ache at the back of her skull. The room grew hazy. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing in time with her heartbeat. Then, blackness. When Mia opened her eyes again, she was alone. The gallery was dark, save for a single spotlight illuminating the far wall. She stumbled forward and gasped. Covering the wall from floor to ceiling were portraits. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Each one was of the same girl, Evangeline's wide, sorrowful eyes staring back at her in endless variations. Some were screaming. Some were weeping. Some simply gazed outward, their mouths stitched shut by unseen hands. Mia's own hands were smeared with paint, cracked and dry, nails broken, knuckles raw. There were brushes strewn everywhere, tubes of pigment squeezed empty, canvases still wet and bleeding color. She stumbled toward the center and froze. There, larger than the rest, was a painting that did not show Evangeline. It showed Mia herself. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes hollow and desperate, pressed against the inner surface of the frame, as if she were trying to claw her way out. Tears streaked her painted cheeks. Her hands were flat against invisible glass. And worst of all, she was screaming. Mia staggered back, the room spinning. A soft sound echoed in the gallery, the faint, wet sound of weeping. It wasn't coming from the painting. It was coming from inside her. Something had slipped in. Something had used her body, her hands, her talent, twisted them into an instrument of its own grief and rage. And whatever it wasn't finished with her yet. Mia clutched her head, the sobbing growing louder inside her skull, an aching, mournful sound that didn't belong to her, but was now buried so deep within her bones that she couldn't tell where it ended and she began. She wasn't just haunted anymore. She was possessed. The truth Mia was beginning to understand was a slippery thing. It wove in and out of the darkness, half-formed and hidden, just out of reach. Each time she thought she had grasped it, it slipped through her fingers, leaving behind a whisper of something far worse. Mia's nights had become restless, plagued with dreams of the girl in the painting, of cold eyes that stared into her soul and whispered secrets in languages she couldn't comprehend. But she knew deep down that the worst part of it all was the feeling, the sense that she was slowly being erased. Her memories, her identity, even her reflection. Desperate for answers, Mia reached out to an old contact, an elderly woman named Margaret Worthington, a distant relative of the family who once owned the painting. Margaret had lived through the rumors, the whispered stories, and the tragedy that had enveloped the Worthington name. When Mia arrived at Margaret's isolated country house, the old woman's eyes were sharp, her mind still untouched by the passing of time. Her hand shook as she poured tea, but her gaze was steady, calculating, as if she already knew what Mia was about to ask. "You found it, haven't you?" Margaret said, her voice a brittle whisper. "The portrait." Mia nodded, heart pounding in her chest. Margaret set her teacup down with trembling hands. "The painting is not what you think it is," she said, her eyes flickering nervously to the shadows in the corners of the room. "It was never meant to honor Evangeline." Mia blinked, confused. She had always believed the story, the tragic tale of Evangeline, the missing heiress, loved and lost, left to wander through time. But Margaret's words felt like a slap in the face. "No," Margaret continued, her voice lowering. "The painting was never made for her. It was made to trap." Mia's breath caught in her throat. "Trap?" she whispered, barely able to comprehend. "To trap her enemies," Margaret said, her words so chilling Mia's blood ran cold. "It was never about love or loss. The portrait was forged to entrap the souls of those who betrayed her, those who wronged her family. And once it claimed them, it never let go." Mia leaned forward, shaking. "What do you mean? Who was she, really? Why did she—" Margaret's eyes softened with a hint of sadness, but also something darker. "Evangeline wasn't innocent, Mia. She played the game of betrayal and lies as much as anyone. She wanted power, control. She made her own enemies, and when the time came, she found a way to trap them. First, it was her father, then her lover. And the rest, well, they came too." Mia sat back, her mind reeling. She had imagined Evangeline as a victim, a girl caught in a cruel twist of fate. But this changed everything. Margaret's voice dropped even lower, a dark secret slipping from her lips. "And don't think for a moment that you're different, Mia. This painting knows what it's doing. It doesn't just trap. It feeds." Mia's heart thundered in her chest. "Feeds?" Margaret's eyes locked onto hers, the weight of the words sinking into her soul. "Evangeline's soul is tied to it. But she's not the one you need to worry about. It's the others. The ones who made the painting what it is. The ones who feed it every time it traps another victim." Margaret's voice fell to a whisper, as if speaking it aloud might summon the very thing they feared. "The painting has been feeding for decades, Mia, and it's hungry for more." Mia's hands trembled in her lap. The image of the crying girl in the frame, the haunting, sorrowful eyes, was no longer just a symbol of sadness. It was a predator, a force that fed on betrayal, greed, and the twisted remnants of those who had made the mistake of getting too close. And Mia was next. Mia's world was crumbling. Every day that passed, the boundaries between reality and the nightmare she had invited into her life blurred further. Her once familiar apartment now felt foreign, hostile, like a stranger's skin that she had never truly worn. The painting had become a constant presence. It no longer hung silently on the wall. It watched her. She could feel its eyes on her every time she moved through the room, and every night it called to her in the dark, its cries a twisted lullaby that refused to let her rest. But it wasn't just the painting. It was everything. The way people looked at her, the way they spoke, the way Noah acted around her. Noah, her boyfriend of 2 years, had always been a steady presence in her life. Calm, reassuring, his love a balm for her worst days. But lately, there was distance, a coldness that settled between them, like a dark cloud refusing to part. At first, Mia thought it was just stress from her work, from the growing chaos of her life. But soon, she began to notice the signs. Noah was avoiding her gaze. He was coming home late, staying out all night without an explanation. He was different, and there was something he wasn't telling her. One evening, after weeks of silence, Mia confronted him. She had enough. "Where have you been, Noah? What's going on?" Her voice was sharp, the anger bubbling to the surface, but she couldn't help it. She needed answers. He hesitated. Then his gaze dropped, and for a brief moment, Mia saw something in his eyes, fear, a flash of panic, quickly concealed beneath a mask of indifference. "I've been busy," he muttered. "Work stuff. You know how it is." "Noah," she said, her voice softening, trying to reach him. "This isn't just about work. You're shutting me out. Something's wrong, and I can feel it." He took a long, slow breath and looked at her. "I never wanted you to get involved in this, Mia." She frowned, confused. Get involved in what? Noah's expression twisted, something dark and heavy pressing against him. "This," he said quietly, motioning toward the painting that still sat on the far wall. Her heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want you to know the truth." Mia's pulse quickened. She had a sinking feeling she wasn't going to like what was coming next. "Tell me the truth about what?" she demanded. Noah stood, his voice shaking. "The painting, Mia. The curse. I knew what it was. I knew what it could do. And I let you buy it. I helped you." Mia stared at him, her chest tightening. "You knew?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "You knew what this thing could do, and you didn't say anything? Why? Why would you do that?" His eyes were wide with guilt, but also something else, something darker. "I was paid to make sure you bought it. I didn't know it would go this far." Mia recoiled, her stomach turning. "Paid? By who? Who paid you to do this?" He hesitated, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "The family. The Worthingtons." Mia's blood ran cold. "The Worthingtons? The same family that—" "Yes," Noah interrupted, nodding slowly, his face ashen. "I was hired to make sure you took it. They knew you were the right one. The painting needed you. I thought it would pass, that it wouldn't actually do anything to you." Mia felt the room spin. Betrayal, raw and bitter, settled in her chest like a stone. She stared at him, her mind racing. How had she not seen it? How had she trusted him so blindly, so completely? He stepped closer, his voice pleading now. "Mia, please, I never meant for you to get hurt. I never wanted this." But his words, his apologies, fell flat. They meant nothing to her now. "I should have known," she whispered, almost to herself. "I should have known." Noah reached for her, but Mia stepped back, the distance between them widening like a chasm that could never be bridged. "Noah, you knew what you were doing, and now it's too late." The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She wasn't just being hunted by the painting. She had been chosen, manipulated, fed to the curse by the one person she had trusted most. She had been part of the plan from the very beginning. And now Mia had to face the consequences. Mia sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the painting. Its eyes, though still painted on canvas, seemed to burn into her, searing every doubt, every fear into her mind. The sobs had stopped for now, but the silence that followed was even worse. It was as if the painting was waiting, calculating, savoring the stillness before the next act of horror. She couldn't take it anymore. It had been days since her confrontation with Noah, and she was no closer to finding an answer, to finding a way out. He had disappeared that night, leaving her alone to face the consequences of his betrayal and the painting's growing influence. Despite her desperate search for solutions, the answers all seemed to lead to the same place: destruction. She had to destroy it. That much was clear. But what would happen to her if she did? Would she be freed, or would she become just another soul consumed by the curse, trapped inside the canvas for eternity? A chill ran down her spine. She had heard rumors, whispered accounts of people who had tried to destroy the painting before. All of them had failed. The painting had only grown more powerful with each attempt, its hunger growing insatiable, its grip on reality tightening. Each soul that tried to break the cycle had only fueled the curse, feeding it more life. No one had ever succeeded. Not a single soul had escaped. And yet, Mia couldn't live like this. She couldn't let herself become another lost memory, another footnote in the long list of victims. There had to be a way. There had to be something. That's when she found the psychic. Mia had heard about Mariah through a fleeting conversation with an old acquaintance who claimed Mariah had a gift, a second sight that allowed her to perceive things beyond the mortal realm. The more Mia's mind churned with despair, the more she realized she had no other option. She needed help. She needed someone who could tell her what was happening, what the painting really was, and if there was any way to stop it. When Mia arrived at Mariah's apartment, she was struck by how ordinary it looked. The decor was simple, nothing more than a few plants and candles, the air thick with the scent of incense. But there was something in the atmosphere, something otherworldly. The air felt thick, like a storm was brewing. Mariah greeted Mia with a knowing look, her eyes sharp and piercing as though she could see straight through her. She didn't ask any questions, just motioned for Mia to sit. "Tell me what you've been experiencing," Mariah said, her voice soft but firm. Mia recounted everything: the painting, the cries, the strange events, and the unsettling way Noah had betrayed her. She left out nothing. Every detail spilled out, the weight of her words heavy in the air between them. When Mia finished, Mariah nodded slowly, her expression grim. "The painting is alive," she said quietly. "It's more than a mere object. It feeds on souls, trapped in an eternal cycle, collecting victims for its hunger. The more it feeds, the stronger it becomes." Mia's stomach churned at the thought. "So, what do I do?" Mariah's gaze turned sorrowful. "There's only one way to break the cycle, to destroy the painting. But be warned, destroying it would trap your soul inside forever." Mia's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, trap my soul?" Mariah leaned in closer. "The curse is not just about death, Mia. It's about enslavement. Each time the painting feeds, it consumes memories, identities. It doesn't just take a life. It takes everything that makes you, you." Mia's eyes filled with tears. "I can't let it have me. I can't." Mariah raised a hand, silencing her. "You must understand this before you act. Every person who has tried to destroy the painting before you has failed, not because they weren't strong enough, but because they were never meant to succeed. Their souls now fuel the painting's hunger, feeding it in ways you can't even imagine." Mia's breath caught in her throat. "You mean, there's no way out?" "There is no escape without sacrifice," Mariah said, her voice grave. "You will either become part of the painting, or you will destroy it, but in doing so, you will become its prisoner for all eternity." Mia's hands trembled. The weight of the decision was suffocating, the dread rising in her chest like a tide. She couldn't imagine being trapped forever. But she couldn't live like this either, constantly hunted by the painting, constantly haunted by its eyes. "Is there any other way?" Mia asked, her voice cracking. Mariah paused, her expression unreadable. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "I cannot offer you another way. I can only tell you that every soul the painting has claimed, every life it has consumed, is now part of its endless hunger. You may think you can break free, but in the end, it is the painting that chooses." Mia's chest tightened. The painting chose. The realization hit her with a force she wasn't ready for. She had never had a choice. She had always been part of its design. And now it was too late. "Do what you must," Mariah said as if reading her mind. "But be prepared to face the consequences." Mia's heart raced as she rushed through the darkened streets, her mind replaying the psychic's words over and over. She was running out of time. Each second felt like it was tearing her apart. The painting wasn't just an object of horror. It had become a nightmare that was slowly devouring everything in her life. She had to confront Noah. After everything, after all the lies, the betrayal, she couldn't afford to wait any longer. She had to understand what had happened to him. She needed to know how he had become part of the painting's curse. Her hand shook as she unlocked the door to their shared apartment. The silence inside felt suffocating, as though the walls themselves were closing in on her. The faint sobbing, once a daily visitor, had stopped for now. But Mia knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She could feel the air itself growing colder, heavier. The weight of the curse hung in the room, a presence she could almost touch. Noah was sitting on the couch, his back to her. The room's dim light cast shadows over his face, making him seem distant, almost foreign. Mia's breath hitched as she saw the subtle changes in him. His posture was hunched, his eyes hollow, as though the very essence of his being had been drained. When he turned to look at her, there was something wrong in his gaze, something that made her blood run cold. "Mia," he said, his voice sounding empty, distant, as though he was speaking from a place far beyond the present moment. "I've been waiting for you." She stood frozen, her heart torn between the man she loved and the monstrous force that had twisted him into something unrecognizable. He seemed so familiar, yet at the same time, utterly alien. "Noah," she whispered, the name tasting like ash in her mouth. "What happened to you? Why? Why did you let me buy the painting?" Her voice cracked as she asked, the truth coming out like a knife, sharp and painful. "You knew. You knew everything, didn't you?" He didn't answer at first. He just stared at her, his eyes glassy, his lips trembling as though fighting to speak. And then, finally, he spoke, but his words weren't his own. They were cold, hollow, like echoes from a deep, dark well. "I never wanted you to get involved," Noah murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought I could stop it. But I was wrong. I I didn't realize what it would do to you." Mia's pulse quickened as she stepped closer. "What do you mean? What did you do? Why didn't you tell me the truth?" Noah's eyes shifted as though struggling to focus, his face contorting with a pain she could no longer ignore. "I didn't want to see you suffer. But I knew. I knew the painting would choose you. It always chooses. It never lets go." A sudden, frantic laugh escaped him. It was hollow, devoid of anything human. "I thought if I helped you get it, if I got you to take it home, maybe it would let me go. Maybe I could break free. But I was wrong." His voice cracked, and he fell silent. Mia's stomach churned, the horror of the truth settling in like a cold vice around her heart. "You wanted me to take it? All this time. All the lies. It was so I would end up like you?" Her voice trembled with disbelief, her world shattering piece by piece. He didn't respond, but Mia didn't need him to. The realization hit her with full force. Noah wasn't just part of this nightmare. He had been a pawn all along, a pawn the painting had already claimed. The once loving boyfriend, the man who had shared her hopes and dreams, had already been consumed. All that was left was a shadow of the person he used to be. As if on cue, Noah's body jerked, a flicker of something alien crossing his face. Mia's blood ran cold as she realized he was slipping away, and with him, any chance she had of saving him. "Noah, please, tell me how to stop it. Tell me there's still a way to break free," Mia pleaded, her voice raw with desperation. His eyes flickered again, and for a brief moment she saw something in them, something human. His gaze softened, and he reached out a trembling hand. "I love you, Mia," he whispered, his voice strained. "I wish I could save you. I wish I could take back everything." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Don't say that, Noah. You can fight this. You're still in there. I know you are." But as his hand reached for hers, a terrible change came over him. His eyes clouded over again, and his expression morphed into something colder, more vacant. "I'm sorry, Mia," he said, his voice no longer his own. "I can't help you anymore." Before Mia could react, Noah's hand dropped. His body went limp, and his gaze shifted toward the painting. It was as though something inside him had died, and he was no longer the man she had loved. His face twisted into an expression of utter despair, and for one horrifying moment, Mia realized Noah was gone. He had been consumed. But before she could process this, the painting began to scream. The sobs that had once seemed distant were now deafening. Mia could feel the painting's hunger, its insatiable thirst. She could feel it clawing at the edges of her mind, dragging her closer to its dark embrace. She had no time to grieve, no time to process what had just happened. The painting was taking her, and it was taking Noah with it. Noah, she whispered, but the name felt empty. The man she had loved was no more than a shadow, a pawn in a game she had never understood. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw him, the real him, standing behind the painting, his eyes wide with terror. His figure flickered like a fading photograph, his features growing dimmer by the second. He was trapped, like so many others before him. And now Mia realized she was next. Mia stood frozen in front of the painting, her body trembling as the last vestiges of Noah's presence slipped away. The sobbing, now deafening and relentless, seemed to pulse from within the canvas itself, growing louder with every passing second. Noah was gone. The painting had consumed him, just as it had consumed so many before him. Mia's heart ached with the realization that she was next, just another soul to be devoured by the cursed masterpiece. But deep down, she knew she had no time left to fight. The air around her felt thick, oppressive, as though the very walls of the apartment were closing in. The painting, once just a mere object, now felt alive, alive in a way that made Mia's skin crawl. It wasn't just an image anymore. It was a living thing, a creature of darkness that fed on the sorrow of the souls it trapped. She stared at the figure of Evangeline, the ghostly little girl in the portrait, her eyes now hollow, as though she too had been swallowed by the curse. The girl's sorrowful expression twisted, as though mocking Mia for her foolishness. Every inch of the painting seemed to be alive, shifting, breathing, moving in subtle ways that defied logic. Mia could feel herself slipping. Her thoughts were becoming cloudy, fragmented. Her memories, who she was, who she had been, were fading, slipping like sand through her fingers. The painting was already beginning to claim her. She reached for the canvas, her hands shaking as she pressed her fingers to the cold surface. She had to destroy it. She had to end it. But deep down, Mia knew that nothing could stop the inevitable. "Please," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Please let me go." But the painting was indifferent to her plea. It had already made its decision. With a sudden jolt, the painting seemed to lunge forward, as if trying to break free from the wall. Mia gasped, stumbling back, her breath caught in her throat. She reached out in desperation, trying to grasp onto anything, but her fingers slipped through the air like it had become too thick to hold. It was then that she realized she wasn't just losing her memories, she was losing herself. She was becoming a part of the painting, trapped within it, her very soul at the mercy of the cursed art. In the mirror across the room, Mia caught a glimpse of her own reflection. It was her, but it wasn't. The face in the glass was smiling, grinning, in a way she never had before. The smile stretched unnaturally wide, mocking her, reveling in her horror. Her heart pounded in her chest as the painting seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat, each beat dragging her further into its grasp. The sorrowful cries of the little girl in the portrait mixed with the distorted sounds of Mia's own voice, until everything blurred together in a cacophony of anguish. Mia fell to her knees, clutching her head in agony. She could feel the darkness swallowing her from the inside out, her thoughts fragmented, her identity slipping away like a dream she couldn't remember. The painting was taking her, piece by piece. Her vision blurred, and for a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing in the room. It was Noah, or at least, the remnants of him. His eyes were empty, hollow, and his once familiar face was now twisted in agony. He was reaching for her, but there was no warmth in his gaze, only the emptiness of the curse that had claimed him. "Help me," Mia whispered, but the words felt hollow, as if they were someone else's. Noah's face flickered, shifting like a mirage. His lips moved, but his voice was no longer his own. "Mia," he whispered, a shadow of his former self. "You can't escape." It's already too late. Her heart shattered as the realization sank in. Noah was lost. He was a prisoner, just like the others, and she was next. There was no escaping the painting, no breaking the cycle. Mia's vision blurred, and the room around her began to fade, replaced by an overwhelming darkness. The painting called to her, pulling her into its depths. She could feel herself slipping into the canvas, her body becoming one with it, her face becoming one with the sorrowful girl she had once seen as just a piece of art. She reached out, desperate to claw her way back to reality, but her fingers passed through the air like smoke. It was as if she was already there, trapped in the painting, where time no longer existed, where nothing could save her. As Mia's body slowly disintegrated, her soul beginning to vanish, she heard the faintest sound, the sound of footsteps approaching from behind. She turned, her breath catching in her throat, but when she looked, no one was there. And then, as though it had been waiting for her, the painting whispered, alive, aware. The gallery lights flickered once, and Mia's heart sank. She had failed. The curse would continue, and the painting would move on to its next victim. The room grew quiet again, save for the soft sobbing of the little girl in the painting. Mia thought she had disappeared, completely lost to the curse. But then, in the stillness, she saw it. A subtle smile, a small movement inside the frame. The painting had won.